Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Done Before. This time, the best of Trek. Not the best of Star Trek in general, but the best of Trek. You'll learn about here. It was a fanzine. You're going back in history on this one, baby. Speaking of history, you might have noticed at IABD some things are history there. Yeah, we're slimming down. We're getting more streamlined, if you will. Still have a lot of offerings. We're still going to be here going through space for you, going through these episodes. Check it out. Also, I'm going to mention at patreon.com/IABD, we're new tiers to check out, new reward levels. Go check those out. Keep this thing going. Thinner, happier, fitter, happier. I'm doing a Radiohead song now. I'll keep doing that off mic. You keep doing the best of Trek here on It's All Been Trek Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. We've got what's become the normal crew here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. And
I'm Marianne.
Marianne, I hope you come back next week for Futurama. Are you going to come back?
I think so.
Okay.
I'll check my schedule.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Cool.
I would consider a personal favor if you came back next week. Today we're talking the best of Trek. Before I let Steven run with this, because this is pretty much his episode, Keith and Marianne, have either of you heard of the best of Trek or are familiar with the best of Trek at all?
I have not. I looked at the book and...
Which book? The best of Trek 2?
Yep.
Oh, I'm a little confused because I didn't realize this was about. Like, I thought that you were just like, hey, let's talk about what we thought was the best of.
No. The best of Trek is a series. So, Go ahead, Steven. You explain.
So Trek was one of the first fanzines early on. Fanzines used to be a thing, magazines essentially, or whatever, that fans would put together. So Trek was one of the early ones and the best ones. And then eventually they started putting out books of the best of Trek.
18 in total.
Yeah, and I think I bought like the first 5 or 6, I think, and they were just articles from the fanzine.
I'm sorry, so the fanzine itself was called Trek.
Yes. It was called Trek.
Just Trek.
So
the best of that fanzine.
They could get away with Trek, and then they would put together compilations, the best of Trek, with some of their best articles and stuff.
Is there fan fiction in it?
Some.
There is some, yeah, and
It's not mostly it's essays, but there is some fiction.
Yeah, and they get into speculation about the different characters. I think we might have talked about this on one of the other episodes about when we talked about speculating about Kirk McCoy, Kirk Spock, McCoy, all that. And there was definitely some
that kind of fan
some deep dives into that. So they would get into that, but a lot of it was just different things. Some of it was like rankings, like kind of what we do. One of the other things that was one of the favorites was they had one of the writers would answer questions or explain things, kind of like me and Jimmy-Jerome tend to do. Try to explain things away or be like, I didn't understand how this happened. Well, here's what I think.
Yeah.
You're retconning it.
Yes.
Yeah. And some of it was just like, oh, well, some of it was just like, well, you missed this part of this other episode or this or that. But some of it was very much like, well, here's what I think potentially could have happened. And those were really cool. And some of it was, some of my favorite parts being a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid then was like, they did kind of like we're doing next week, the Futurama kind of spoofy thing. Yeah. They did spoofs of shows, and they were very, very funny.
Like
very
Mad Magazine style or something?
Yeah. It was all just written, but it was... If you kind of just knew Star Trek, you'd laugh. But if you knew the details, then everything was funny. Every line was hysterical.
So, as Steven mentions, they put out like 18 of these best of Trek books. What I think is super ridiculous is they put out 2 of these, the best of Trek books, which is compiled from the best of Trek books.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Now, the second one is the one I have. I got in some bargain bin, I think for like 99 cents whack when I was a kid, and I've read it before, and I was rereading some of it. That's just like begging for people's money. And funny enough, they never put out a third one, but they put out several more of the best ofs after this one.
Oh, wow.
So this isn't the end. This does start to get the next generation a little bit, but I just reread the first 100 pages, and it was all like, at that time, these were all written, it was before Star Trek 4 had come out. So these are all from a early fan perspective of just having the series and a couple movies. Nobody's mentioned the animated series in what I've read so far.
Yeah, and one of the guys, GB Love, who helped put together, he was one of the first guys to start putting together conventions. Mm-hmm. So there was always a lot of features on those, and back then I was like, oh man, I'm going to conventions someday. And I love that part of it.
Have you been to a convention?
No, but...
I have been to a convention. I have met Patrick Stewart.
I am...
Very nice.
In 6 weeks...
You're going to see
I
Michelle.
will meet Michelle Nichols.
By the time this is aired.
Yes, I will have met Michelle Nichols.
That's awesome.
And Colleen and I will get our picture taken with her.
Is it at a Star Trek convention or is it something?
It's Cincinnati Comic-Con, I think.
Okay.
So She's gonna be actually Brent Spiner's gonna be there too.
Do you think they still have like pure Star Trek conventions now?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do.
I think so. Yeah.
Star
they're
Trek Las Vegas is the
specifically
big
that.
one every year. That just happened. But there are
Oh,
other.
Alan
Star
Tudyk's
Trek.
gonna be there too.
Ah,
but
he's
yeah.
not Star Trek.
Yeah, but
Close
He's
enough.
Firefly. Yeah. One of the first.
Steve the Pirate.
The first article in this, the best of Trek 2, you geeks would get a. I mean, I'm a geek too, but
Yeah.
you guys are geeks, so you'll get a kick out of this. It's called Diversity in Combination. And what this author, Alan Manning, has done is worked out the characters in a mathematical equation. Basically, so if you consider E emotion and L logic,
Yeah.
then there are only 4 different combinations of those two components.
I remember reading
so
this.
you've got EE for extra or EO. Sorry, you can't do EE because that's just stacking emotion.
Right.
So EO, the pure emotion, is McCoy. LO, the pure logic, is Spock. EL, the combination, is Kirk. And 00, if you're doing both zeros, is the Enterprise itself. And then when you add a third factor in of support, then they also figure out how Scotty Chekhov, Uhura, and
Fit in.
Sulu fit in.
Nice.
And that's why they argue that nobody else could ever break in. Like, they go into, like, Savick and Decker and Ilea and even Chapel, and how they're just repeats of character types they already have. And then they even talk about, in, like, Star Trek 3, blowing up the ship, how Spock becomes the OO and replaces the Enterprise, and everybody shifts positions and stuff.
Oh, wow.
It's really neat. It's very, very nerdy, but I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I also just read an article from a nun who basically said Spock's Jesus Christ and here's why, and goes through.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's one of the other things I remember reading, and I think I mentioned this when we did the Galileo 7, was one of the, I think it was the same writer who did the solving problems, answering questions, was talking about the concept of character rape, where characters acted completely out of... And Galileo 7 was one of the examples, and I think we've cited other examples where it's like,
What was it?
No, that's
they
interesting.
seem weird. Galileo 7, the one where Spock's in command of the shuttlecraft and they crash, and all of a sudden they're all turned against him.
No, that's interesting. That concept. I've thought about that, I guess, fairly recently, just because of like the idea of comic book characters and
Yeah.
all the adaptations. You know, I have all these different writers for the different materials themselves, all the different movies and cartoons. And somebody gets a hold of it and just does something, and something that's part of the canon, or that's the idea of this character doing this, and so
Yeah.
It's up to the next comic book writer to retcon it
Yeah.
out.
So,
Yeah.
very interesting. I just read 2 parts of a 3-part essay where they talk about who the supporting characters are. So the first one is Uhura, Rand, and Chapel. And then the next one is Sulu and Chekhov. And I haven't read the McCoy Scotty one. But they go through who these people are at their core off screen.
Yeah.
Based on the hints we've seen on screen.
Yeah, those are
And
awesome.
I don't agree with all of their assumptions, but they really back up what their opinions are with specific concrete examples. They also, at this point, are basically considering the novels canon, especially the adaptations of the
Yeah.
films, which have additional things that aren't in the films. So they talk about before Star Trek 4 came out, they're all talking about, oh, Sulu was given command of the Excelsior, but then they saw the Enterprise and now he's lost it, which was not in the film, but apparently it was in the novelization of the movie. So there's some interesting things in there.
One of the other things that was cool about it, since they couldn't actually use pictures from the show or anything, they had all these more, and it was very 70s kind of drawings, but they were actually cooler to me than the actual pictures of the Enterprise. So if you go out online and you look at just like the covers of Best of Trek 1, 2, and 3, and 4, it's all these space battles that look really cool. And again, to go into Star Wars really quickly, Attack of the Clones, for me, the last 40 minutes of that looked like the covers of the Best of
Nice.
Trek.
Because everything rips off Star Trek.
Exactly.
That's fine.
So it was very much, yeah. So I just the covers alone, I would just sit and stare at like, this is awesome. So I thought that was very cool too. And I don't think that the magazines had those awesome covers, but the books, I think they went and got somebody to do them. And so that you could look at it and be like, oh, that's kind of looks like the Enterprise, but we can't get sued for any kind of copyright violation.
Well, this ship on the cover of the Best of Trek 2 looks similar enough. It could be a
Yeah.
Starfleet design,
Yeah.
but different enough that it
You
doesn't
can't
quite...
get in trouble, yeah.
It's got a lot more frill to it, but it's got the
Yeah.
nacelles. One thing I thought was interesting that they included in this book, which came out in like 92, so well after Star Trek 4, was an essay written before Star Trek 4 speculating about what Star Trek 4 must be.
Oh, nice. That's so cool.
In broad strokes, not in specifics.
Do you think it was close? I mean,
No. No, I don't. I mean, they were basically like, everybody's crew's ruined. How are they going to get this back? Well, maybe Starfleet will sweep it under the rug and look the other way because they don't want Genesis to come out publicly. And, nobody hypothesized they go back in time and save whales.
well, yeah, I guess
That's hilarious.
I wish I could. I think that would be a very frivolous use of time travel for myself to do, but I think I would love to be able to just go back and drop that theory somewhere and see the people reaction of like.
See, but there's no internet back then.
Well, I mean, somewhere, something.
Yeah.
So
I
people
think
go, they're going to save whales in Star Trek 4? What are you talking about?
In 1980s. It even says within this essay, like, I don't think they'll just demote Kirk and give him another ship with his crew, because that would just be silly. Why would they do that?
Somebody said
How
that?
can Starfleet justify that? Yes, because they had no clue that they would save the Earth. They also, one of the essays I was reading, argued about why Kirk had to let the Enterprise get destroyed in Star Trek 3. Like, they do think Star Trek 3 is poorly written for a lot of reasons, but because they think they decide the Enterprise had to destroy and then work backwards. So most of the article is about how poorly written the movie is because they were working backwards instead of forwards. But then at the end they're like, but once they were in that situation, destroying the ship was the only option, because here's all the other options of why they would have been worse.
That goes into my theory about they had to kill something each film. So they killed Spock in 2, and then 3 they killed the Enterprise. Although in each instance they were never really dead because they both came back to life, obviously. But
That reminds me of something you were saying before about the OO thing. So
Yes.
would that make Spock like maybe a unifying entity of some sort that they cluster around to be their family?
Right.
Is that what
Because everything was about Spock and he was not expressing emotion or logic. He was just the vehicle of things
that makes
moving.
sense.
That's why in Star Trek 3 he became the OO and took the Enterprise's place.
that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that article was really well
Yeah,
done.
I'm going to read that. I wanna
Yes.
read that.
Yeah, please.
I
You're
remember
welcome to borrow the book.
that vaguely from. Plus, Spock was showing everyone his O face. That was the other reason he was an
As a kid, you mean?
One of the others did say, Savick was really good, and maybe if
There was
Nimoy
that
had,
scene.
if Nimoy had left the series, they could have paid Kirstie Alley because they could have given her his
That's
salary.
right.
Not that they should have, but
Right.
they could have.
Right.
And then she could have taken his place in the dynamic. They also just threw offhand that Robin Curtis did a terrible job in Star Trek 3. And I appreciated
She
that.
wasn't that bad.
If we had never had Kirstie Alley, I would agree with you. By comparison, it pales.
Yeah, they should have just renamed her.
Well,
Agreed.
Yeah,
I think that's all it is.
You're right.
really.
If we hadn't had Kirstie Alley, we'd just be like, we just wouldn't be talking about it. Because, that Savick character wasn't that interesting. That'd be it.
Yeah.
But since we had Kirstie Alley,
Kirstie Alley was so good.
she was
To me, whenever I think of the film, she looms so large
Mm-hmm.
that it's hard to believe she was only in one film. It really is.
I mean, I know we're biased. It's a Trek podcast, but isn't that Kirstie Alley's high point?
Cheers.
No,
Well, this was all at
Maybe.
the same time.
Well, but then that gets
he's
into
agreed with you.
another.
Cheers. Yes, I agree.
That gets into Diane versus Rebecca thing, which I'm firmly Team Diane. But and that's
No,
not to say
was
I
that-
didn't enjoy
yeah.
Kirstie Alley's
That
work
was
here and there. I think she's.
I still like Kirstie
Yeah.
Alley, but yeah, she hasn't done anything on this level
Yeah.
since. What other stuff was in these essays, Stephen?
I think we've hit a lot of it because they would do those deep dives in the characters and everything else, and I think we were talking off mic how this was kind of the only way to get those. I mean, you read all the novels and stuff, but those are all extended universe, I guess. So there was that, but as far as delving into the original series and deep diving, this was all we had. Obviously, way pre-internet, at least us having access to the internet. So not only was it a way for Star Trek fans to come together, but it kind of kept feeding that. And, obviously the movement was going on with the conventions. We've talked about that, and the animated series, and potential phase 2, and finally the motion picture and coming back. Not to mention, Star Wars and all that, feeding it. Yeah, and I just, not only were they written with love, but I just, some of them were just, there are some clunkers like in anything, and it really is the best of. I mean, they really are well written. Like I said, those spoofs, I thought the spoof episodes were hilarious.
I mean, just rereading the first 100 pages of the novel, I probably read 6 or 7 of the essays. And I'd say about half were good and half sucked.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
the ones that sucked, I was having a hard time getting through.
Uh-huh.
And I almost just skipped them so I could get through more of the book, but I didn't because I'm not like that.
Yeah.
And it's been a while since I
See,
read the
I
rest of
am,
the book.
so I will actually get to If I'm not intrigued by the first few pages, I'm moving on.
Yeah. I would read them as a completist.
I mean, I read that whole book cover to
yeah.
cover originally,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, and that's, I think I mentioned this earlier, is I would read them and then I probably read some of them a couple times.
Which book was cover to cover?
The best of Trek 2.
Okay.
That's the only one I own. I haven't read anything outside of that.
One of the other ones I read that I really liked, and that's where I thought you were going with that, the one
And
about
this was before Amazon, so.
the O's and the LO's or whatever. I read several articles in there about IDIC, Infinite Diversity.
That article was titled Infinite Diversity.
Yeah. And I thought it explained the concept so well and just...
well, yeah, they talk about how it's not... Infinite diversity is actually ludicrous. It's finite diversity in finite conversations or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure there were other ideas.
Right. Yeah, and so to that extent, there was some high-minded stuff. It wasn't just, how'd they get away from the Klingons in that part?
No,
kind of stuff.
No.
I mean, but it actually had that too. It hit all levels.
I mean, if I was a kid when this was coming out, like a teenager, I would have been writing into them and trying to... Yeah. If I would have been engaging.
Yeah. I was...
As an adult, I'm kind of separated enough that I'm like, I wouldn't want to spend my time now reading all these essays. Had I discovered these in the 80s, I would have been more into them for sure.
There's also the internet at this point. I mean, not just internet, but like internet.
Like,
I mean, there's just
how much fan fiction would you be reading right now if you were a titeenager?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, it'd be the same thing.
I mean, I used to read and write Watership
Sorry,
Down
please
fan
go.
fiction. So
Continue.
No, I was just saying that information in general is saturated to the point where it's hard to hold your attention with anything, especially in a written medium like a a paper medium.
If you are obsessed as a teenager or a young child, I feel like if you want it, you can find it. I mean, look at some of our friends that have obsessions like this. I'm going to use an example, Lauren. Like, if she, this anime has one season, so therefore I'm going to go out and find everyone that has written every form of fan fiction for that, and she will read it all and share it with me, because that's what friends do. And so, yes, it's even better now because you can find that information. Problem is, it's anonymous, and you are going to have a written essay in a magazine will not have people being like, well, actually, to everything that you say.
That's
the problem.
I kind of think the days of curating the information was maybe a little better than just having it all there.
Right.
Honestly, because trying to wade through that to me is very intimidating and overwhelming. Whereas this was like, this is the best of Trek. As ridiculous as it is, in my opinion. If you've already got the best of, you don't need the best of.
But perhaps you do if you
No,
still
you
find
don't.
things you don't like.
You don't. Because there were still things in there I didn't like.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why you need the best of the best. So now you need the best of the best of the best.
So you're right. They missed the boat. They needed to do a third level in.
Yes,
fourth
give
level.
me best of the best of the best.
Let's inception
fiction.
this.
Yes.
Eventually, it would come full circle and just be the best of Trek, and that would just cover it all.
Yeah. Make the best of the best of the best essays, and then best of the best fan fiction, best of the best character art.
They never did release Trek Unabridged. All the scenes.
But to your guys' points
I don't know.
about, like you said, Marianne, about you can go and find it, and your point, Jim, like, well, I think it's one of those things where as you search, you find that thing that works for you.
Yeah.
Like you guys know, I share a lot of stuff from The Ringer, and for me, that's my one pop culture sports place. So it's like, I'm not going to go to the 900 other sites. Google recommends stuff on my phone. I'll read those too. But I know if I go there, they're going to hit a lot of spots. And the stuff they hit that's not me is stuff that I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, all the Game of Thrones stuff was easy. Like, nope, don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of
like that.
sad that I almost never rewatch or reread things these days. When I was a kid, I did so much rereading of the same Star Trek books over and over. I mean, I read Imzadi every year.
Yeah.
Every year. Because it was so good.
If a next in a series comes up, I will read the next one, the previous one, or if I have time, like if I know it's coming out in a month or two, I'll reread everything.
I'll try, but who has time anymore? I don't anymore.
Driving.
Yeah.
Maybe Dallas.
That's what I do, is when I'm driving.
I don't do audiobooks. Yes, I know. Who has the time? Yes, Keith. Marianne. I'm just kidding. I'm having a serious. It was a good joke. I appreciate it.
Jimmy and I are trying to have a conversation. But yes, I think it's important. That is a missing thing that, getting to reread that. Try audiobooks. I recommend it in the car.
I don't comprehend with audiobooks. I do still a ton of podcasts, but I don't comprehend as well with audiobooks. audiobooks.
Yeah,
I
I
have
feel like
to-
an audiobook I've done it in a car the few times I've done it. Like
Yeah.
that. Like it's got to be
My
going from
mind
here to
sometimes wonders.
yeah.
And that's why, like, I'll listen to a lot of my podcasts at, like, double speed. But if it's, like, Throwing Adventure Hour or something scripted, I'm listening to it at single speed, and even then sometimes I have to go back because I'm,
Yeah.
like, missing things.
Yep.
I can't be doing work while I'm listening to a book. So, but I
Yeah.
can definitely drive, and because I used to always like I would. Here's the thing. This is sad. So I would always call my mom on the way home from work, and since my mom passed away, I needed something. I would find my mind thinking about mom
Yep.
too much, and I get sad and cry. And you don't want to cry in a car because then you can't see. Then you drive off
That's
the
right.
road, and you
Not
go in a
safe.
ravine, and
Not
then you're
safe.
stuck in a ditch. And so what I've done is I've picked up podcasts and Audible books, and that's what I listen to now. And it has helped me so much get through a ton more books, even though I love reading, and I read really quickly.
Yeah.
It's something to do in that time when I'm driving, where I normally would have called my mom. And I know it's three years out now, but it's gotten to be a thing that I do now. Sorry for bringing us down.
No, that's
No.
I appreciate it.
My
Yeah, that
mind
makes
wanders
sense.
too much when I'm actually reading text.
No, not
I'm
me.
I'm a slow reader because of that. It's not like I don't comprehend it, but I mean, I have to really just like rein my mind and to keep going. I like it, but it just I'm slower.
Yeah. So back to Trek.
Yeah. So
No, it was a great way to engage.
It
when
was,
There
yeah.
was little way to do it.
yeah, and speaking of focus, like I mean, I was a smart kid back then. So I would just zip through my homework. It's like that was just another incentive. Just like, all right, I'm zipping through this, and I would just be sitting in class reading my Star Trek books while everyone else
Yep.
is doing their stuff. It's like,
Me
what the hell's
too.
wrong with that kid?
That's why we're friends.
yeah, exactly. People are like, what's wrong with that kid? I'm like, yeah, I'm
No, no.
smart, but I gotta get back to this.
I gotta get back to the Star Trek
Yeah,
book. Yeah,
come on.
absolutely.
Did you draw Enterprises while you were?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all I did. I drew a million pictures of.
Did you want to wait and,
Enterprise.
like consider the question
you?
before he's finished? Like the did you
I can't draw.
Yes.
I would
It's like, yeah.
So I can't draw. So what
I can't
do,
either, but I did it.
So what I do, this is really nerdy. I name all the characters, the actors that played them, and just write them in lists. Even though I've done it 50 times and
I
they were
know.
memorized, I just keep writing them.
I've done stuff like that, and I doodled a lot.
I got really into the Star Trek young adult novels when I was in middle school. Even though I was reading adult novels earlier than that, they started putting out young adult novels, real thin ones.
Huh.
I've got the whole collection in the
Wow.
basement. They were Next Generation in the Academy, and they did a couple of Voyagers, and they did a couple of DS9s that were like just Nog and Jake, because they were for kids. I remember distinctly doing standardized testing in middle school, and you were allowed to leave the cafeteria, and I'd finish in half the time, and I'd bring a shoebox with literally 20 young adult Star Trek novels because I'd get through a couple of them in that
But
couple
'cause
hours.
It's like, even though you're reading at a different level, this is like bubble gum. I'm
Yeah.
just taking a test. All right, I'm just.
But it's
gonna
still my
read
favorite
this.
characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to see Worf and Geordi and Data at the Academy, you
Oh,
know?
that'd be cute.
Oh, they're good books. I'll have to get them out there.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't read them recently, but I really liked them. I reread all of them many times. The only thing that bothered me is too many of the characters met each other at the Academy.
Oh.
Like, it wasn't the whole crew,
Yeah.
but like Data and Geordi would cross over and they'd see each other, and they did that. A few of the books had two of them together, and I'm like, oh, come on.
The thing that I don't like in current comic books, cartoons for younger people is everything has to have a message.
Oh yeah,
This
no.
is why we work together.
No.
And it's like, oh no, I don't need to know what why would Marvel, why would Falcon not want to, or why would Iron Man not want to share his knowledge, or why is he so stubborn? Oh, and the message at the end is we all share, and and everyone has different skills or whatever.
Yeah, these aren't like that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I like those kind.
There's something that just kind of happened to, I mean, cartoons in general, and especially things that are adaptations of sci-fi and other, older material usually. It's just last couple years, really. I mean, because remember, like the Marvel cartoons before that, it was fine. It was it was like what you would want. I want to see these other things happen. Let's explore these things. And now, as she's saying, it was like maybe, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, something like that. Something just like happened. They started yanking all this stuff off the TV,
Marvel was
replacing it
acquired
with
by Disney.
much more, kind of
I feel it's when
Something.
Marvel was acquired by Disney.
maybe.
And so they were like, everything has put a meaning to this. Even though we're in the middle of Iron Man's career, all of a sudden he doesn't want to believe in magic, or he doesn't want to whatever. You know, he doesn't want to share with Falcon or something.
Anyway, for Trek.
This has been one of the biggest tangent episodes we've ever done.
So the below decks thing, is that what?
You can leave most of it in. Yeah, Below Decks is coming out soon. It's a cartoon.
What's it going to be on?
CBS All Access.
Yeah.
In the
We'll
U.S.,
see.
all the Star Treks are on CBS All Access.
Yeah.
I think we get Picard next, season 1, and then Discovery season 3, and then Lower Decks.
Do you think it's going to be adult, or is it going to just...
Lower Decks?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be adult.
So back then what I would have used Trek for, like I was referencing earlier, like so Google now suggests stories on my phone. I have a Google phone, Samsung, whatever. So I'd say the stories are split between different things. There's Marvel, Star Trek, and then sports. Oh, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So that's pretty much they know me. They recommend all that stuff. That's what they recommend to me, pretty much. Or if the Ringer has something, they'll recommend that.
Quick plug for free if you like Marvel. Subscribe to Today's the Day podcast with Andy Mack as he and Casey get in the weeds.
Yeah.
Heavily
Oh,
on ranking all the Marvel heroes and villains by powers and
really good.
likability.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, these are like 3-hour podcast episodes, but they're pretty interesting.
Yeah, when I used to read Trek, I used to have a list of each one ranked and by season with a little ranking and how they and then I had by season and the entire thing, kind of like we did, but
Well, how did you...
lost in the space of time.
How did you compile it? Like by memory, or did you revisit them? Did you? Have them written down, or just...
It was just memory, just like and I was watching. It depended on when it was, but sometimes I'd only see 2 or 3 episodes a week, and then at some point I think it was Channel 43 out of Cleveland was showing it every night, so I would, for that brief period, I was seeing it 7 times a week, so I would watch every episode, and I would commandeer the family television Saturday night at 6. They'd show that. And I think Kung Fu was on after, so I'd take 2 hours. 'Cause I really like Kung Fu, too.
Oh, Kung Fu is a good mate.
Which has almost the same fan following as Star Trek.
Exactly.
I mean, give or take a lot.
Yeah. So, so in a way, I'm still getting my Trek. Obviously, this is my big Trek fix, too. But
Yeah.
I get my Trek fix that way. I don't obviously read as much about Trek because I'm reading all these other things, too. But, I
love that we're doing this podcast because I used to spend all of my free time on Star Trek, like books, TV, like from age 8 to 18. Really, it was my thing. And now, I feel like I hadn't gotten to read or watch that much Trek, and now this gives us appointment time on a regular basis, which I really like. I'd really love to pull out some of the old novels and get back into them too. But
I know
We
there
should
were
do a
some
book
favorites
report.
back there.
we could. We could do a book episode or 2, but it would take so long for us all to read and get to it.
Especially me,
Can Samantha make that one of the book of the month?
She should just do QVC
Correct.
1 year's
Yeah.
old Trek books.
Yeah.
Imzadi for sure. If you guys want to read Imzadi, I'll discuss that all day. Let's do Imzadi. Okay, well, let's make that a bonus between seasons 1 and 2 of Next Gen.
Okay.
So you can start reading it whenever, and we'll get to it.
Is that a Trek?
is it?
Is that a
It's a Next Gen.
Next
novel.
Generation? Okay.
It's Riker and Troy's backstory.
Okay.
It's written by Peter
okay.
David, one of the best novels they've ever done.
All right.
So if you're listening, we'll be doing a special episode on Imzadi after season 1 of Next Generation. So pick it up and read it.
That reminds me of how another reason I like the Romulans so much is
Yeah.
there was a couple, I think it was 2 books, they all both had Phoenix in the title, but it essentially involved Kirk, Spock, and the Romulans. So I spent 500 pages with them, and I remember really liking them. Those are 2 of the ones that come to mind that I would go back and read if I could find them.
I mean,
somewhere.
I could easily make a top 10 or top 20 Star Trek novel list
yeah.
for us.
I'd have to go back and look.
Oof, who has the time?
Who's got the time?
Dallas. And speaking of, let's let him do that. We'll
Yes.
wrap this up. Next week we'll be back with Futurama to end our mini season.
That's going to be funny.
And then I assume.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in years.
I
don't think
imagine
you've
it will
even
be.
seen it. Yeah,
I haven't, but I'm
guessing.
You just guessing?
I've seen a lot of other Futurama
I've seen
episodes.
it, yeah.
Wait till you see Scotty's role in it. You're gonna love it.
Okay, I can't wait to see.
I mean, that monologue that DeForest Kelly does is great.
Oh. Until next time.
Live long and prosper.
Make it so.
And read zines.
If you've got the time.
It's All Been Done presents.
Who's got the time?